So first point is take it into the national agenda, own it, and look outside. If we can't relate to it, just Google it up. Creative economy, Britain, 1 in 20 jobs are from the creative industries. It's a second growing sector in the economy. Singapore has owned it. So that's my strong point on a first basis. And that we have also considered that we have shown impact already in Sri Lanka with what we have done with engaging with the apparel industry and design and things like that, and how we've gone up the value chain, how we've shown that entire villages of women can be restored on an economic level. So really, I mean, we've been canvassing with the Honorable Minister as well, and who's been following our work. So I think we just need to nail it and now really get on with it. My second point is actually on scaling up. One of the biggest challenges we have is if in the budget we can incentivize, at village level, they're quite happy with earning 100, 200,000 income, a month. So how can we incentivize them to scale up to the next level? This sector, that's another issue we have. So because if you really want to nail the economic numbers in, then you have to have a way of monitoring it and having an incentive to get women to have the need to scale up. For some reason, they're not doing that.
The first thing I would like to talk about is the guaranteed buyback agreement that the local manufacturers entered into with the Ministry of Health in 2015. This has been a real great success because we have been able to increase market share from 8% to 18% within the short period of 4 years. In addition, the number of local manufacturers have increased from 8 to 15 as of today, and there are several more coming in. The second is that the SPMC, the State Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Corporation, gets the preference over us when it comes to supplying to the government hospitals and the MSD. And there are several new entrants coming in who join in with the SPMC, so they will get preference over us. So we would like confirmation that the agreement will be extended and that the number of products that we manufacture and the quantities we supply as at date, because when we signed the agreement, we only had 32 products formulations in. Now we provide 86 formulations with more going to be added on next year. We would like to get confirmation that those 82 products that we are in the quantities we supply this year will be extended over after 2019 and thereafter. The second thing that I would like to take up is a tax relief on raw materials and packaging materials. Now, the imported finished goods, pharmaceuticals that come in is totally tax-free. But unfortunately, we pay 2.5% PAL on most of our raw materials. And we also have pay 7.5% on some raw materials and on practically all the packaging materials that we have to import, which we cannot get locally. So we would like to have this waived off completely. The third one is removal of VAT, PAL, and NBT, which comes to about 25% on our machinery and equipment. For some strange reason, there are just 4 items that are being exempt from these taxes, including spray dryers, which is for the film coating, which we don't buy all the time, pumps, and something that is totally unnecessary, really. We would like it if you could extend the waiver of the VAT, NBT, and PAL on all pharmaceutical machineries, and it has to be listed under the HS codes. Thank you.
I'd like to touch on something that cuts across several sectors. This is really to correct an anomaly, which is something that was brought into the new Inland Revenue Act last year on the concessionary rate being applicable for certain entities in particular sectors like exports, education, IT, agriculture, various sectors, where it says that this entity has to be predominantly engaged in that particular activity. Now, I just can't understand the logic or the rationale for this. I mean, I believe it was supposed to make the whole thing simpler. And also, gross income is not defined. So, for example, companies would have income from a particular activity, they would have interest income, dividends, all of that. When you put all of that, many companies would not fall within the threshold of 80%. The second point is on incentives granted to certain industries. I think this was brought in, it was something that for dairy, renewable energy, solid waste management and pharmaceuticals, that is exemption from VAT PAL on payment of a bank guarantee. This was something that was brought outside later on under the customs ordinance, and the minister has given an order under the customs ordinance. But Mr. Articular, I think you would understand that actually VAT PAL says don't come under the customs ordinance. So this needs to be brought into those particular acts to regularize it, because otherwise we could have problems later on.
Firstly, it would be that we have a fundamental issue on the market capitalization, and we need to improve liquidity, and only 20 to 25% market capitalization is represented on the GDP. So therefore, I would urge two things can happen. We need to encourage private sector companies to list. So there was these concessions given in the past, which was stopped, I think, in 2017. So we need to encourage more and more private companies, and we need to push for it. And also maybe we need to appoint a kind of a committee. Apart from the concessions, we can also come in with some other mechanisms to encourage private sector to come in and list. The other thing, of course, is the much talk about SOEs, that we need to somehow find a way of getting some portion into the space, listed space, because it is pretty important that we need to move into the emerging markets. MSCI industry requires certain the criteria, and to move into that market capitalization would be pretty important. In terms of education and research, I would like, I think even at the A-level entry point, we don't have much emphasis given on capital markets. So it is pretty important for people to know about investments rather than also not only savings, because that will enable us in terms of investments for people, retirement plans. They get an idea when they move forward. So we need to bring into the curricula some kind of capital market, equity markets, debentures, options available for investments.
We're still not attracting the large funds and the large investors because we are not a big player in the global market. To that end, I think we've had some discussions before. Some of the previous budgets have announced some incentives, but they haven't got implemented. Three particular things are that one is the REITs. We've been talking about REITs is a good way of attracting large insurance funds and large investors to come in. The second one is we talked about 40% of foreign investors being allowed to borrow 40% locally in rupees. You still have 60% coming into the country in foreign investment. What that gives that foreign buyer is some security and participation of banks, and naturally the banks can do their due diligence on the customers before they lend. Another point is foreigners working here. We have quite a few expats working here. They are also required to remit their monies outside, and if they want to invest, bring it back again. Because currently the law says 100% of the investment should be remitted from outside. Can we allow them to use the monies they're earning locally?
There's 10% of the GDP is being brought by the women who go to the Middle East. It doesn't see, and I think there will be greater health issues and social cost issues that we will have to look at in another probably 10 years to come, when all these aging people return to the country and the NCD has grown remarkably high, and their children are not being given an wish to stay in the country. So most of the millennials are leaving the country, and we will be stuck with a very aging, old rural sector with very depleted asset bases. So I think we have to really look at the budget in a more sustainable framework, looking at not increasing dollar number, but increasing assets of the country. Two other things that I would like to suggest. One, I think with the withholding tax issue on the savings, we are eroding the savings base of the country. I mean, for the last 40 years, I am representing an organization that have mobilized saving by the people who did not, were not recognized as people who actually had money. But through Sanasa, we were able to mobilize quite a huge amount of money into the financial market. Third one is, I think I suggest that if you can provide incentives for the insurance industry to promote life insurance for women.
First is to position and promote Sri Lanka as an ideal destination for cinema tourism. This is something that has huge potential. Currently, as of last year, we had about a $7 million forex earning. It is envisaged that 2020 would be at least 15 million, and it could go up to over 30 million if the right environment is set up for that. My second point, which I have been really mooting for a long time, is positions for women on boards. Unfortunately, it's about a 1% representation in the country, with about 295 listed companies in the country. I don't need to tell you the importance and the value addition that women could be bringing to boards. But since there seems to be some kind of a barrier for maybe the boys' club to accept the women, I suggest that a policy decision could be made by introducing a quota system, at least till this barrier is broken, and then the quota system can go off.
Today, as you are aware, there is a huge issue that the banking industry is facing because of the delays of payment from the government and the related organizations. Increasing NPLs, increasing interest rates have given signs the banks to sort of scale down credit growth. That will definitely hamper the industries. Number two is there are lots of things said about the availability of financing from the IT industry to and all that. Not only availability of funds, and the interest rate is also quite a factor for startups and again for the businesses. Both interest rate and the availability of financing will not support an industry. It is the policy, the consistency of the policy, that we should have development banks to support this kind of industries. We as commercial banks sometimes with the limited resources we have cannot embark on financing large projects and giving long-term financing. Something of similar was spoken at the last budget meeting. There was suggestion about establishing an Exim Bank. I'm not fully aware whether it was established. Anyway, I don't think anybody is aware of availability of services of an Exim Bank. And my third point is taxation. I believe most of you are aware today finance industry is taxed at 52%. Because finance industry is seen as a lot of profit-making industry, but one has to understand this industry has to be quite stable, and with this we are going into new Basel III compliance and accounting regulations. We need to have a lot of capital. What happens is when these taxes are increased, the transaction cost, I mean finally it's directly or indirectly, it translates to the financial cost, and that gets into the people who are getting our services. So therefore, I believe going forward, maybe the consolidation is the way forward. Today, the NPLs are rising, not the banks, I think the finance companies are facing difficulties. Some time back, Central Bank, looking at this situation, pushed us for consolidation, but it had a natural death thereafter. I believe it's timely now, the finance industry and the Central Bank looking at the industry again, not the banks, I think the financial companies, and push for consolidation. Thank you.
So we have a target of reaching $5 billion US dollars by 2022. For this, we need to create 200,000 jobs. And one of the biggest concerns we have now is the IT graduate output for the year. One is the quantity and one is the quality. So to address the quantity aspect, I like to suggest that the government universities will increase the IT graduate output by at least 10 to 15% per year. That is to address the quantity aspect. And to increase the quality aspect, I suggest that we work on improving the employability of these graduates who come out. Because sometimes these graduates who come out can't be directly put on the job, at least some percentage of these graduates. So we might have to work on increasing the employability of these people. And also along with this, we have a lot of vocational training centers in the company. And there's also a question whether the students who come out of these vocational training centers can actually start working in our software export companies right away. And the second point is another issue that the industry is facing is the migration. So a lot of people are migrating to Australia and currently to Singapore as well. So we really need to address this issue. One thing is to provide them with incentives to stay on in Sri Lanka, not to migrate, and the other thing is to bring them back. And the third aspect is, at graduate level, the male to female ratio is 50-50. But when it comes to the IT industry, the ratio drops to a mere 75-25. So it's very sad. A lot of the females don't work at all, or halfway down the line they drop out. So we need to have statutory policies in place so that these females will actually get into the workforce and continue working.
Two simple things are increase the number of ships that call the Port of Colombo. Number two, increase the number of services that we offer these ships and their cargo, and also the rate and the quality of these services. In order to do this, the primary, most important thing for Sri Lanka at the moment is to increase the port capacity, the handling capacity. At the moment, the Port of Colombo is the fastest growing port in the region, and as a result, we are almost reaching capacity. And we are at a shortage of deep water terminals. It's an ideal opportunity to get foreign exchange into the country, and this East Container Terminal has been partially completed and been lying idle for the last 4 years. So bringing this on stream is vital. And secondly, improving the ease of doing business. From the time a vessel arrives in the Port of Colombo, we deal with more than 7 government authorities. More than 75 sets of manual documents are exchanged. These are reasons where we are low in the LPI index and the ease of doing business index. And digitizing this, as said before, is a key crucial part of improving the ease of doing business and attracting foreign investors. Thirdly, having a fiscal policy regime in order to incentivize the shipping industry is also vital. So I'll move on to the bunker industry, which is a vital part of the shipping services industry. When a ship calls the Port of Colombo, it requires so many services. Bunkering, one of the main services. Singapore provides more than 50 million tons of bunkers annually. Sri Lanka provides only 600,000. One of the main reasons is we have only a 60,000 tank capacity in the Port of Colombo. Improving this storage facility is vital. And this is an area, again, where it's open to foreign investors, yet nobody is interested because of the lack of storage capacity, the lack of ease of doing business. The licenses for bunkering is only given for 1 year. So to even invest in a bunker barge on a long term is difficult to do. Secondly, the taxes on the bunker vessels. In operating in the coastal vessels, there is an ESC. If a bunker vessel is chartered, there is an ESC of 10% on the charter hire income, which makes chartering a bunker vessel completely unfeasible. This is something that needs to be looked at.
We'll tell you some of the problems we have. 1% tax on total revenue is paid to Sri Lanka tourism. This is not on profit, but on total revenue, which is a big expense to us. We also pay 15% VAT twice a month, which used to be a quarterly payment before. And added to this, we pay a 24% corporate tax. Now, with all this, we are also burdened with ad hoc charges by government departments. For example, we have this panel showing in Sparsilon. I think most of you would have seen in Colombo 3. These panels, we pay 1 million to the government department. And now suddenly, the second year, it has been increased to 2 million. And this is, when we ask them why it is increased, they say it's decided by a committee. So I think these are very unfair charges which we have to pay.
I just like to ask whether the tax authorities understand these changes, whether they appreciate it, and whether they recognize this when developing tax policies. For instance, we know that about 60% of tourists are now going to a particular sector. Are they being taxed? Is it only the 40%, the balance 40 that is being taxed? Are the burdens of taxing getting increased in this sector until perhaps it becomes not feasible to continue in business anymore? My second point is about the bureaucracy. I think it was mentioned by others as well in the form of ease of doing business. Simple things are not getting done, and it appears as if bureaucrats are now crippling business rather than enabling it. A simple thing I can talk about is the global tourism campaign we are talking about. Everyone talks about tourism being a low-hanging fruit, but to the best of my knowledge, our competition is not from Thailand or Malaysia or any other part of the world. It's our own bureaucrats. They are simply not enabling us to just go on with this campaign. It comes to a particular point and then everything falls flat. My third point is actually, I think the Treasury has taken a lot of the money from the tourism promotion because we have not spent it, it's our fault. Can I ask for some money to be allocated for just to educate the general public about the solo female traveler? Actually, it need not even be foreigners, even locals. There is a huge, I think somebody also mentioned about it, women are looked at sex objects and not as normal human beings to be respected and considered. Whether they travel in a bus or whether, there are a lot of solo travel is very popular now around the world, and we are also getting a lot of women who want to travel by themselves. But they are just, it's very, very difficult.
The three ideas I'm presenting have something for the industry as well as the government. The first is on increasing quality of university education so that we can reduce the lack of professionals in the industry. So the proposal is a paradigm shift in the university models we have, possibly not reversing the ones we have, but when we come up with a new model, what we are proposing is to establish universities with 80% government subsidized payment schemes, which offers an intensive 1-year industry-influenced curriculum, 2 years of full-time experience at very low pay rates, and a final year of part work, part study model where they further specialize in one industry skill. This proposal increases employment rates, reduces the lead time to produce an industry expert, which is a problem we are really struggling with now, and reduce costs of government-funded education because the students actually spend 2 years getting professional experience, which the government doesn't have to spend on. The second is something that the women also have brought up is mandated childcare facilities at government-stipulated childcare rates for BPM, BPO companies, particularly companies which are equal to or greater than 500 in headcount, or parks which have a total of 500 headcount, or any government-sponsored IT parks that are being aspired. We want that to be mandated, not even spoken about, but mandated. I believe that this proposal extends employment opportunities and also reaches out to women who the government has invested in an IT education, and they can come back and contribute to it. And it also assists the industry to retain the talented resources.
Are we actually exporting hub for the women products? No, we are not. We don't have finished products. Our quantity is very low. Our quality is very low. So can't we export anything else? We can. Why we are not exporting the services? We are only exporting the women labor, but not the services. Then again, everyone is talking about how we can change the attitudes and perspective. Then we have to invest on the teachers, not on the people who are already old in Sri Lanka. Teachers are the people who are changing the mindset of the children. Where no investment is made to change the mindset, psychological change of the teachers, and no allocation has been made.
What I'm proposing is that when a person buys an insurance policy, since of late, there's a tax which is imposed. When we declare the bonus to the customer, from that component, 14% is charged as tax for the first 3 years. Then thereafter, the tax is increased up to 28% from the policyholder. The other proposal is that what I'm asking is, I think insurance industry was privatized far back in 1998. At that time, the insurance industry was open to private sector or the government. Any risk could be written in the country. But thereafter, this was by a gazette notification, the private sector was restricted by writing the government business. We have been lobbying for this for quite some time. I think that it will be given a fair play to everybody, and also for the government businesses, that they will get the best risk opportunities, private sector service, and the risk will be looked at in a fair manner and very competitive pricing too, if it will be open to the private sector too.
I have two challenges I'd like to put to the Honourable Minister. The first challenge that my fellow tanners and I face is we don't have a proper land and infrastructure and technology to sustain and continue this business. Leather was identified as a thrust industry in the early 90s. Various steps were taken to promote the business and also to support it. But up to this date, none of it has been successfully implemented. Leather currently is being imported legally and illegally to face the scarcity of this. So the solution I'm requesting from the Minister is to provide us, the industry, a proper land and infrastructure so that we can build a leather city to take this business forward, and also the right type of technology to treat the discharge, which is available in India now, which is known as a zero discharge technology, which if the government can procure for us in an affordable manner to be given to the individual tanner so that it's a cost-effective manner to be competitive in the global space.
First of all, thank you, Standard Chartered Bank, the alumni of Colombo MBA, and the Daily FT for inviting us. Thank you for all the suggestions. I would say right at the outset that the suggestions were very broad. It went far beyond the budget itself, and therefore I would say that one is those suggestions that were related to the budget. If you would like to provide us some written submissions with a little bit more detail, that will help. Some of the other issues which were dealing more broadly with the macro picture and the economy, I would also suggest that you continue to take these issues up with the relevant agencies of government and the ministries also. Government also has a continuous issue of actually balancing the priorities between manufacturers, producers, and the consumer, which is the large base and the large voter base, I might add. And we are a democracy, and constantly government stand in the middle actually trying to balance these things. Particularly in Sri Lanka, there is no really, in the small businesses, there is really no equity. And therefore, everybody goes to a lending institution and expects a lending institution to solve the issue. So there are some fundamental issues here, and I think we have to develop that. Very recently, if you saw when the president was at the United Nations, during that, there was a side event in which they just launched a first, if you want, a small equity fund for small businesses. In closing, I would like to say this before my colleagues comment, Somebody said we have the same glass ceiling issue, senior management on boards and women, and somebody said maybe you should have quotas on boards of companies. I'd like to take a quick vote here. All those in favor of quotas on boards of private companies, please raise your hand. Please raise it right up. I just want to get a quick look. Yeah, just a quick look. Okay, thank you. No, just to get a sense, because as you know, quotas are always the second best, but sometimes, these second best solutions have to be done in a reform process so that in the future, you don't really need to have that. That was just to get me a sense of, what the thinking is. Thank you. I'm going to call my colleagues to comment.
I will just touch upon the fiscal policy side that the issues that you all raised. I think you all talked about incentives and tax holidays and taking out taxes, right? But we have to balance these things. But especially if you talked about these taxes on certain raw materials, machines, etc. We will have a look, because the government policy is to tape off these para tariffs gradually. So in that broad sense, we will look into these things. The other one, especially Mrs. Kure talked about level playing field and things. We are looking at that point. We will see how we can address that. That's one. And I think most of you all rather, talked about this access to finance and things, entrepreneurship. I think government has embarked on this Enterprise Sri Lanka thing, and special, I don't know what, not quotas, special incentives through these interest subsidy schemes for women we have introduced. Collateral issue also for the small entrepreneurs, we have taken steps and we have instructed the banks how to address those issues also.
Thank you very much for this response on the part of the Finance Ministry. I'm sure the Minister would follow it up, and as he suggested, specific proposals on the budget, yes, please, you can send it to the Treasury, and in case you have no access, you can even send it to the Colombo MBA Alumni Association, who will forward it to the relevant officials of the Ministry. No. And thank you very much also for Standard Chartered Bank for making it happen, making it a reality for the last 8 years. And thank you very much for the other invitees and participants.